You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Hey, Mama friends, you've joined the Mom Next Door Stories of Faith. And I want you to know that we're praying for you today for whatever stage and season that you are in. God has so much for us as we learn and grow in Him. It's not always easy, doesn't always go according to our plan, but we can trust Him. I want to introduce you to Beth Meverden, who has a heart for seeing children and youth grow up to follow Jesus. And that is the cry of our mama heart, isn't it? So many choices: cloth diapers, disposable, what type of car seat, homeschool, private school, public school. Can I afford the organic? What do I do about birthday parties? Oh my goodness, birthday parties are so overwhelming. There is this all-consuming, never-ending list that goes on in our heads, and it's always scrolling through. But the most foundational thing is, how can I teach my child to look to Jesus and to walk with Him? Beth, before you tell us about the projects you've been working on, we would love to just get to know you and your story of faith. So you could just take us back as far as you'd like and share with us what you are willing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Pam. This is really fun. It's fun to get to meet you and to have this time together. I accepted Jesus when I was 5. I was raised in a Bible-believing home, church-attending home. I'm an only child, and that wasn't the plan. My family, we ended up having 5 miscarriages. I was the second pregnancy of 6, and it was kind of a hard trying to figure that part out when I was growing up.
That's
But
hard.
it was such a blessing to be in a home with parents who love the Lord. And I grew up in a very, very small little church and accepted Jesus when I was 5, like I said, and with all my little 5-year-old heart. And about that time was when I got the mama bug. I wanted to be a mom really, really bad. I started volunteering in nursery as a 5-year-old. So I've been doing church ministry a very long time, and just really felt that desire to be a mama. And so most of my life worked toward that end, I guess, trying to figure out babysitting and Sunday school volunteering and all those things, vacation Bible school, all that fun. And what ended up happening was when I was a little bit, it was probably the end of elementary school, had some confusing things happen to myself and got confused about, I knew that God loved me. I knew my parents loved me, but had some really hard things happen and was trying to figure out what my faith actually looked like. So I ended up living a pretty compromised life all the way through middle school and high school. By the time I was in 6th grade, I was in a full-blown eating disorder. I was a bulimic, because I didn't understand what was going on with my body, had a whole bunch of crazy things happen. As far as I had a little friend whose brother told her she needed to start losing weight, and kind of just took that on myself. And we started exercising together a whole bunch in 6th grade. And she is about half my size still. And so it was a confusing time. And so actually I was a bulimic until I was 18 years old and did a lot of self-punishing, those kind of things, because I knew that I was making wrong choices and dishonoring God, but I didn't know what to do with that. And my parents and I talked about it some, but it was confusing for all of us. And so what ended up happening was when I graduated from high school, right after that, God showed me really clearly what I was doing and how it was dishonoring Him, and I needed to stop. And that was awesome freedom for me. They say that just like with alcoholism, you have to say that you're a recovering bulimic. And so it's, a life of trying to figure out what that looks like. And bulimia is more, and all eating disorders is actually a disorder of control, feeling out of control in your life. And most of what was going on is that I hadn't really fully given God control of my life. I was trying to be good enough and do all the right things and whatever, but was living a very compromised lifestyle, trying to please people and trying to have relationships with friends. And and focus on a lot of things that weren't of God because I was very afraid to be alone.
A lot of times in church, we go, well, they're going to church, so they're doing
Mm-hmm.
everything, and we don't recognize the internal struggle that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even grade school, they're having internal struggles in grade school, junior high, and
Mm-hmm.
how important it is to foster that openness to talk about it. And I don't know. I know in our home I've probably done better at certain seasons than others as a
Yeah.
mom, and I can reflect on my childhood, and I don't know that I have any answer or advice. It's just an observation that
Uh-huh.
wow, we can recognize that even children growing up in church homes, in homeschool families,
Mm-hmm.
in private school, all the things, there is a
Mm-hmm.
place where that's happening.
Absolutely. And my parents and I have had some amazing conversations about what that could have looked like differently, and have totally open and honest with each other about that. And there's been some awesome redemption that happened. But what ended up happening was I knew I loved God and children and music. And so I didn't know what to do with that. And you get that pressure, especially junior year of high school. You got to make a
Yeah.
decision. You got to make a decision. Go find who you're supposed to be. And so I
Uh-huh.
kind of swapped it on its head and did music and kids and God and went into music therapy. So it was a very confusing thing. When I actually finally got into music therapy college, I realized I was not cut out for it. It is a very clinical profession, more
Huh.
like medical than I thought. And
Interesting. Wow.
yes, and it's phenomenal. It's an amazing ministry. It's an amazing job. It just was not for me. And so I kind of went into an identity crisis, which God had been leading me up to a long time. So that happened in September of what would have been my junior year of college. But the April of my sophomore year of college, I was on a mission trip and I was serving, and we were listening to the message, and the pastor said, some of you are being called to full-time ministry, some of you are being called to full-time mission, some of you are being called to whatever. And God, spoke to my heart really clearly and said, that's you. And I went, oh God, please don't do this. You're choosing somebody, the wrong person, Lord. I think you're kind of making a stupid choice here. I know you're perfect. I don't think,
It
no,
doesn't make sense to me, right? I can't see it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I was not living for him at the time. And I was a believer. Like I said, I'd made the decision. I knew if I would have died, I would have been with him, but I was definitely not living for him. And so it was interesting that he still called me, even in my sin, but while we were still sinners, Jesus died for us.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Hmm.
that was what happened. That very much my testimony. And what ended up happening is that September, I had just learned about youth ministry. I grew up in Wyoming, and there was not a lot of official professional youth ministry at that time in the 90s. And so I didn't even know that people could be paid for telling teens the truth about Jesus.
Yeah.
And my cousin had recently gone into youth ministry and had been kind of talking to me about it. And what ended up happening, I can remember, it was the first time I actually laid prostrate before the Lord on my dorm floor and went, God, okay, I've been doing this myself the entire time. And I've been faking like I'm relying on you, and I have not been relying on you. And that's it. I'm done. You're in charge. I'm sorry. I'm making you Lord of my life. So I had that heart of belief that he really was who he said he was. And I had given my life to him as much as I thought I did, and then really went, okay, you really are God of everything. And so that full surrender was awesome. It did take about a year for that full surrender to take in effect, and ended up leaving college, dropping out of school, and driving home. It was about a 22-hour drive. And by the time I got home, I knew I was supposed to go into youth ministry. I knew what college I was supposed to go to. I was supposed to go to Colorado Christian University, and that I was supposed to start in the semester, start in January. So I got to go home and live with my parents for a semester and do some redeeming work on my heart, and it was awesome. So part of the reason I knew that God was calling me into youth ministry was because I had a void. I had been going to a youth group. I didn't know it was a youth group at the time. It's not what they called it, but they didn't teach the Bible. They taught, human sexuality, making wise choices there. They talked about loving people. They talked about very general things, but we rarely talked about Jesus. So once I figured out what youth ministry was and the radical change God was doing in my life, I realized I needed to go help other teens. I needed to go help teens make wise choices and do more prevention work. I did a lot of redemption work when I first started, but I love the prevention part of things. And so I have been now doing youth ministry. So let's see, this is, I think we're at like 26 or 27 years that I've been doing some form of youth ministry. And God has used me to speak to a lot of young women about especially eating disorders and control, those kind of things, making wise choices early on. And so, yeah, I've been doing that kind of ministry for a really long time. And not long after I surrendered my life to the Lord, I met my husband. We were actually doing youth ministry together. We were doing internships at a church, and we were friends for about a year and a half before we started dating. And so we've been doing some form of ministry our entire relationship. It's pretty awesome. And we got married in 2000, so I always know how long we've been married. That's very helpful.
I had twins
And
in 2000, and so I calculate their birth lickety split.
yes, it's easy to do that. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, and so we have 3 children. One is about to start college. We've got a high schooler and a middle schooler. So we're in a fun new stage. But yeah, I've been doing some form of ministry or youth ministry specifically for over 25 years now. So that's part of why God used my story and what had happened, and mostly what I had chosen to do to now make him Lord of my life, to help teens make that choice, to make them Lord of my life. So that leads to then the mama heart of what happens is that in doing youth ministry, what I have seen is parents need to do intentional discipleship at home.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Well, the youth group you said you went to, it was like a lot of, you said you weren't even sure it was a youth group,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
it sounds like very much life skills, social skills, functional things. But I think we can teach how to be a good person and be a good citizen without the core of why. Like, why are we called to do that? And we homeschool, and I have talked to people who said, oh, well, they homeschool, they should be fine, or oh, as long as you homeschool. And I'm like, you know what? I have been doing this long enough that I know Christian families who are secularly homeschooling their children, as in,
Yes.
hey, I'm teaching them reading and writing. Like, they put their focus on because there's this, you got to have a competitive edge. And of course the grandma and the neighbor and aunt and uncle and the school district says, are you academically teaching your children? You need to make sure the academics are there. Nobody's asking, are you discipling your children? Are you teaching them the things of the Lord? And so for me, that's something that I'm also sensitive to, is that, you know, we can be doing all the right things. We can be taking our children to church and depositing them in the church nursery or in the youth group or in all these programs. We can take them Wednesday night and do all the right things, but there's more to it. We need to go back to that core and teaching them the worldview and a deeper knowledge. I mean, it's a balance, right? We got to have some fun. We got to have some, I mean, theology can be fun, I got to tell you.
So what I've seen and experienced in the last 25 years plus of youth ministry is exactly what you were just saying. Parents tend to abdicate their role as the primary evangelist and disciple maker in their children's lives. They just do that because for lots and lots of reasons. One of them is they weren't trained themselves. So they don't know how to start. They don't even know how to do it. Another one is that they feel like they're inadequate. They know they're supposed to do it, but they don't even know where to find the resources to do it. And then another one is that's what we pay you for. So that's what they say to youth ministers and children ministers. That's what we pay you for. We don't
we've
need to do that.
professionalized so many things that we're like, well, there's somebody else who can do it better. I mean, with everything. But yet what God has called you.
And, you know, Deuteronomy 6 says difference. So that's what I talked a lot about. I talk a lot about that when I'm speaking and when I'm training parents. But, you know, it says, listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving to you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road and when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Deuteronomy 6, 4-7. And that's the NLT version. But, part of the problem is parents don't know that applies to them. And that we need to be speaking about our faith and training our kids wherever we're going, whatever we're doing. And we don't know exactly how to do that. So much of what I do now with the ministry I started, I believe it is now 11 or 12 years old, a little, maybe older than that. I call it Train Your Child. And I try to empower parents to train their own children at home. And that's part of what's going on right now. I ended up writing so let me back up just a little bit. So after having been doing youth ministry for about 5 years, I kept seeing all this abdication of discipleship from parents and being confused. I'm like, I'm so excited that you're bringing your kids to youth group. I'm so excited you're bringing your kids to church. But what I saw in what I call my churchies, the kids who have grown up in the church, is these big holes in their understanding of the Word of God. They would hopefully know the truth about Jesus and how he saved them and how to accept that gift. They would hopefully know, most of them knew the fruit of the Spirit or the full armor of God or those fun things that we like to teach in children's ministry, but not necessarily other aspects of the Bible. And I kept going, what is going on? Why is this happening? And my husband and I kept seeing these I don't know what to say, like holes in ministry. Yeah. And we realized, I was talking to a good youth pastor friend at the time who said to me, Beth, people are angry with me that their children aren't growing spiritually. And he said, I just told a parent, church is a vitamin for the meals you should be serving your children at home. And I tell you what, he probably said that to me 20 years ago, but that has been resonating in my heart and my soul for 20 years. That is exactly what church is supposed to be. It's not what we treat it as. Yeah.
Right.
It's not
what we treat it as.
It is to be a supplement. And, we want to use what our children are learning in Sunday school and youth group and, use that to supplement what they should be learning at home. But we really need to be intentionally training them at home and helping them learn how to read the Bible and teaching them how to pray and talking to them about the things of the faith. And it doesn't mean that, we sit down for 2 hours a day and this is all we talk about. Even in homeschool, it's part of the curriculum. But we want to integrate their faith. So many students that I would deal with and still deal with, they see church and Jesus as one piece of the puzzle of their life instead of Jesus being the picture of the background of the entire puzzle. And so that's what I try to train parents, like help them understand how to integrate their faith in Jesus in every aspect of life. And so what happens is there's this hideous statistic that is still happening. It's been happening for over 30 years in youth ministry, that over 80% of teens who are Christian, I'm going to say that in quotes, graduate from their faith when they graduate from high school. And so having been in youth ministry for 25 some years now, I'm trying to fight against that. I'm trying to help parents understand how to fight against that statistic. And what's happened is that as my husband and I've been doing youth ministry and other forms of ministry as well, we've had the opposite statistics. When we implement some specific keys, some specific actions, teens get more engaged in church, children get more engaged in church, and so they don't graduate when they graduate from high school.
Because they see it is active. They see it, if they see us living it out as parents, youth leaders, and we're living it and it's a lifestyle of faith, really, right?
Yes.
Then
Yes,
they don't see it and learn it as a compartmentalized thing. I really like the picture you just made. I'm very visual. So, Jesus is that cover of the puzzle box, right? And we use that picture and it makes all the other pieces fit together. It makes so much sense.
Yeah. And it also shows you what pieces probably shouldn't be part of that puzzle. If it's not worthy of Jesus, then it shouldn't be part of that puzzle. And so as you can use that as a good filter for your children, as well as just teaching them the truth about why we're created and what that looks like is to honor Jesus with all of our life, with every puzzle piece. So yeah. With our oldest, when she was about ready to start kindergarten, I was looking for some curriculum to train her how to share her faith. We have the conviction for our children to be missionaries in the public school. And, I actually have a homeschool heart because I would much rather my kids be home with me all the time and doing it this way. But we really felt like that was the conviction for our family. And so I was looking and looking for some curriculum to take her through, and there was just nothing. And
Yeah.
so having been working in children's ministry and youth ministry, I was like, okay, I'm just going to write it. I'm just going to write something for her that's, 3-year-old, 4-year-old brain. And so I started writing that for her. And sadly, that part's not quite published, but every time somebody wants it, I just hand it over to them. I started it calling it Train Your Child. And it talks so much about that our children are to be missionaries and ambassadors, and what does it mean to be a student, and what does it mean to be a friend, and just really intentionally training them. And my daughter's first year of school in kindergarten, she presented the gospel to a kiddo in her class who accepted Jesus. And I've taken my kiddos through this kind of training, just that intentionality at home. And all three of my kids have led people to the Lord. They've led their own Bible studies. They are very active in their faith. So I'm finally that, okay, people need to know about this. And my husband said, we need to be training other people how to do this. So he encouraged me to start a blog. And that's what the Train Your Child ministry started as, just a mommy blog, trying to encourage mamas how to intentionally do this. And it's turned into lots of other things, speaking engagements and writing some books and devotionals and those kind of things.
Well, it's so great that we don't have to wait until we hit some certain level to be able to share our faith.
Yes, yes.
How often we go, oh, someday they will be able to this or that. Well, why not now? Why
Yes.
not? Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Would you speak to the mom who is totally tracking with you, but yet a little bit discouraged because she realizes I've wasted a little bit of time. I could have done different, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling a little regret. I want
Mm-hmm.
to do this.
Mm-hmm. Let me just tell you, I love you so much, and I'm so proud of you for getting to the place where you realize that it's part of what your momming has all been leading up to. So the first thing is to just start small. I've got an awesome resource that is one of the first things I made available. I call it my discipleship map. And if you go to bethmeverden.com, that's just my name, my website, and you sign up for being part of my email list, you're going to get the discipleship map for free. And the reason I love it and the reason I give it out for free is this. It's it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. It says, okay, does your child know the truth about Jesus? If yes, great, go to the next chapter. If not, this is how you tell them the truth about Jesus and invite them into that relationship. And then the next chapter is, does your child know how to pray? If not, here's how to do it. If so, great, go to the next chapter. And we go on like that for just 5 little chapters. It's a very small little resource, but it really helps parents start from from the ground and go, okay, I want to know where my child is, and then I want to know the next step of how to train them and how to disciple them. And that's one of the best things to do, is just start small and go, okay, I want to know that my kids know these basic things. I want to know they know how to pray. First of all, they know the Lord, they know how to pray, they know how to read the Bible. It talks about baptism, and then it talks about sharing their faith. Do they know how to talk to other people about it? So that's just my first very small resource.
As a mom of many, what I appreciate you said is, has my child done this or this? Because
Mm-hmm.
I kind of tend to group think sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
And we did that when we started doing family worship. And as our children grew up, we're going through all this stuff as a family. And we
Mm-hmm.
were training our older children in worldview and apologetics, and we're doing all
Awesome.
this big heady stuff. And then one day I was talking to one of my little ones, and I was like, do you know the Bible? You know that? Or do you know only a boy named David? Like some of these songs
Mm-hmm.
and some of these very most basic principles, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I mean, it was like we skipped. It was like
Mm-hmm.
when they came into the family, we had already passed that section, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
for their little brains, and I know it is good to stretch and like aim a little
Mm-hmm.
above their knowledge base, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that they can grow in that. But I realize, at least with the expanse of ages that I had, there were
Oh yeah.
segments that I had missed out. And so
Mm-hmm.
even mamas, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 kids and you're like, don't think about this as a group, like Do my
Yes.
children know this? Do
Mm-hmm.
my children like stop and like think about this each child
Mm-hmm.
individually? Like, have they reached that milestone? Have I had that conversation? I know it is so easy to forget what I've taught each child, and
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
I start to explain something and they're like, Mom, you told me this a long time ago. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. I'm glad I told you. I don't remember what I told who. And so sometimes it's just like, now I start things with, I don't want this to be offensive, but I don't know if I told you or not. And then I
No, that's good.
continue. And then I'm like, did I tell you? And they're like, no, that's new. Or, yep, I've heard it. So,
Uh-huh. That's great. No,
yeah,
but I think discipleship, that's one of the things we really need to talk about too, as mamas, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the importance of each child. Each child is at a
yeah,
different faith stage. One of the cool things when I first started I started with a blog and then I did a website so I can start consolidating all this stuff. And one of my good friends I think her daughter was 10 at the time. She'd been taking her to church always, and all those things. But the thing I put on my front page of my website is the most important thing. This is the gospel presentation. If you haven't taken your kids to this, do this, because we assume they have heard it. We assume they have heard it from us. We assume they have heard it at church. And she texted me the next day that website went up and said, "Oh my goodness, I just realized I never had told my daughter the truth about Jesus in a way that she could invite him into her heart." She
yeah,
she said, I've been hearing it, but I didn't really know what to do with it. And so sometimes we just need that basic, this is how you do it, this is how you invite them, and then you know where they stand. And then you can go, even if they say, no, I'm not ready for that, then you at least know where they are and you know how to be praying for them and you know what next steps to take with them. And each individual child needs that kind of discipleship from us.
yeah, for sure. A couple words that I had written down on my paper before we jumped in were
Mm-hmm.
humble and humility. Just realizing that we ourselves have things that we need to learn, and our children can teach us about the
Mm-hmm.
Lord. The fact that not thinking that we ourselves know it all, but be teachable ourselves and allow the Lord to teach us things and then allow that to overflow into our children.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example to them if they see parents walking in humility and having that posture of learning and growth.
I totally agree. So my favorite passage of scripture is Philippians 2, 5 through 11. And it's all about Jesus's humility. So thank you. I love that you brought that up. I think part of what we need to recognize as parents is we are to serve our children. And we are to serve them by pointing them to him as often as we possibly can and show them his humility and his service so that we can train them how to lead like that, how to make decisions like that, how to be servants. And that's part of, that's part of why. Okay, so I wrote this book out of talking to a mama. I was talking to a mom on the phone and I didn't really know what I was going to be blogging about next. You're a blogger, so you understand. Sometimes you go, I don't know what I'm supposed to write about. And so I was talking to this mama who was thinking about bringing her children to our youth group. And she was asking me some really good questions about what was important to us and how she could be training her kids and what we do at youth group. And I tell you what, that was a rare phone conversation for me to have these days. Most parents just drop their kids off and say, thanks for taking care of my kids and teaching them what they need to know about Jesus and whatever. But
Mhm.
she really was digging in, and I really respect that. And I realized I was pacing around my house with my heart beating, and I was so excited. I was talking to her about the importance of discipling our children at home, but also discipling our children at church. And how important it is for us to show them how to become an adult Christian and not just sequester them only to children's ministry, only to youth ministry, and those kind of things. And so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to write about next. Okay, thanks,
Mm,
God. And
yeah.
so I ended up blogging this book. It is now titled Churching Kids: 4 Keys to Keeping Your Children Engaged in Church. And it's meant to be sort of an antidote to the disease of that big exodus that happens, that 80% of teens that graduate from their faith when they graduate from high school. And it really is meant to be started as early as toddlers and preschoolers, talking about why church is important, why our faith is important. So the 4 keys are intentionally spiritually training your children at home, big church involvement, church skill set, and then age stage group involvement. So most of the way that you would see American Christian Church right now is we focus on the age stage group involvement. So you walk in the doors and babies go here, little kids go here, teens go way back in the back and with lots of loud music and dark, we put them away because they're so loud. And then and then adults grab their coffee and donut and go sit down and have some me time. So that's kind of how we do it. And then hopefully parents will ask questions. What did you learn? And hopefully you'll get more than nothing or Moses or, Jesus,
Yeah.
just small little things. We want to, spark conversations that we want to use what they're teaching. But we want to really know what's going on as parents and not just go, hey, that's what we pay for. Thanks. High five. Here's some cookie donation, whatever. That's kind of why that's the fourth key, because that definitely has its place. There's lots and lots of benefit to our children being able to be a part of an age stage group. It's good to connect with the Bible on their level and with their peers, knowing they're not alone in their faith. It's good to have a support system of an age appropriate spiritual challenge and encouragement. There's really good stuff to Sunday school and youth group and Awanas and all that. I'm very much an advocate for that. Obviously, as part of what I do professionally. But it really has to start with intentionally spiritually training our children at home, remembering that church is the vitamin, remembering that it's that supplement. We need to determine to train our children in the spiritual disciplines and help them connect, like talking about that, like the discipleship map that I had talked about before, and that Deuteronomy 6 parenting, discipling whenever, wherever, however we can do that.
Yeah.
And then my second key is big church involvement. And this is really important, is that a lot of times what I've seen is a kid will have grown up in the church, nursery, elementary Sunday school, youth group Sunday school. And then what they do is they graduate and they go look for a church in their college town. But what they're actually looking for is a youth group. They're looking for the music that they like. They're looking for messages that are geared towards them, relationships and friendships, those kind of things. They're looking for stuff that's really all about them. They're not going to find it. And so they end up leaving the church because they go, this is what I'm used to. I don't know how to engage here.
Right.
And so what we need to do is train them how to sit in an intergenerational environment and watch other Christians besides just ourselves. We need to teach them how to listen to music and worship God to songs that may not be what they would call their jam, and be different than something that they like, but be able to still worship God through that and listen to messages that are not necessarily pointed at them. Like, what are they supposed to do with a message that's on marriage or parenting? What are they supposed to do with that? How does God want them to use that?
Mm-hmm.
But they can't know how to do that unless we train them how to do that.
Right.
We need to train them to be able to, yes, and train them to be in that environment so that they can build those intergenerational relationships, so that they can know what they're looking for when they graduate from high school and try to find their own church and all those kind of things. And then another big, huge key, this is the, I don't know what to say about this. The most important one is the first one, but the third one is really important. We call that the church skill set. And basically that's training our children how to serve. So we're going back to that humility piece. Church is not really about going somewhere and getting fueled up. That's how we've been framing it for the last few decades. But really, the Bible talks about us going to church to worship God corporately. And it also talks about us going, Hebrews 10 talks all about this, going to encourage one another. We are there to serve other believers and empower them. It is really not about us. We will be blessed by doing that. We will be encouraged by doing that, but it really isn't about us. And so when we teach our children how to serve where needed, have willing hearts and do things even if they don't necessarily want to, but they can be helpful. And then also help them learn about their spiritual gifts and how to use those spiritual gifts for the body. That's what they're talked about.
Yeah.
And then, really, it'd be awesome for them to have a tool belt of different kinds of ways to serve, not just learning how to serve in children's ministry, not just learning the audio visual, not just learning how to be a greeter, but knowing how to do all those different things. And then figuring out, okay, this is what my bent is. This is what I'm really, really good at. I've got a little girl in my Sunday school class right now who is 7 years old and totally has a spiritual gift of teaching. It has been all over her entire life. When she was 3 years old, she used to play Sunday school and play teacher, and she put all her little stuffed animals in front of her and teach them. And you can totally see that. And so I'm working right now with her to help her train her up to be a Sunday school teacher, even that young. And
Yeah.
so we want our kids to have those opportunities, and church is the best place for them to have those opportunities to serve like Jesus, so that, those kind of skills translate over into the world as well.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 keys, and that's what I talk about. I actually, in preparation for my book to come out, I created 4 different free workshops. They're 30 minutes. And they're available on YouTube. If you just go to Beth Meverden, they're all right there, and on my website about bethmeverden.com. But it expands on each of these 4 keys and talks a little bit about it. And there's a little freebie with each of them too, just helping people kind of explore these concepts a little bit more, even before reading the book.
I wasn't raised in the church. I started going when I was 15 and I was caught by youth ministry. And then when I
Oh.
became a mom and we got to that point where we were going to put our
Mm.
children in youth ministry, I thought,
Mm-hmm.
that's not their job. It's my job. I'm not going to send my children
Mm.
to that. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's great for the unchurched kids like I was,
Mm-hmm.
but my job is to disciple and train my children. And so we actually were not very involved in youth ministry at our church. We kind
Mm.
of what would maybe more separatists in that.
Yeah.
And so we actually for a while attended a family integrated church where there weren't even youth ministries,
Cool.
right? We did just all the
Mm-hmm.
intergenerational thing. And I think there were some great benefits for that season
Mm-hmm.
and for those children. And then we ended up moving to Tennessee from Oregon, and we knew nobody. And because we
Mm-hmm.
homeschool, we didn't have that, neighborhood meeting kids at school and stuff. And we came to
Right.
this area not knowing anybody. And I was like, we need to meet other believers. Where do we?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're going to check out the youth ministry. And so
Cool.
my older 5 children really, I mean, we did some Awana. We
Mm-hmm.
did a few things here and there, but we weren't super
Mm-hmm.
involved in that way. And then now my younger children, we have been attending the youth group. And I will say to everybody listening, you need to be prayerful about this because now I've lived on
Mm-hmm.
both ends of the spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
I see benefits and drawbacks to both.
Yep.
And I think that we need to prayerfully decide where we should be. And it may be for a season, and it may be
Mm-hmm.
with certain children. One of your children, we found this to be in our life. One of our children, the youth group has been super great, and she has grown in her faith, and it's been just wonderful. And then there was a season for one of them where it was actually detrimental to her faith to have her in youth group. And it
Mm.
wasn't because of what they were teaching, it was because of the crowd, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Leaders, followers, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that we can have a beautiful partnership, parents and youth leaders. And I think we need to look for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Oh
And I
yeah.
like the way you explained this as church and youth group and those activities being a supplement, but
Mm-hmm.
they're synergistic. We
Yes.
cannot, we cannot solely, God created us to live in community, and he created us
Mm-hmm.
to be in community with the church and other believers. And I think we can fall into pride if we're like, there is no way anybody's teaching anything to my kid. That is my job. I'm the only one,
Uh-huh.
that's
Mm-hmm.
a hindrance, right? And so I just want to encourage everybody listening to just talk to God about that and talk to
Mm-hmm.
your youth leaders, your children's leaders, and see it as a partnership. And in the end,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's some places where you tap out and say, we're not going to be involved in this program or that program, but there's other ways we can be involved and support our church. And if there's a season when they can love on your children and you can work with them, what's the goal here? The goal is that our children seek the Lord and know him and want to serve them with their whole hearts.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. When you are involved in church and you help your children to build those intergenerational relationships, sometimes it's hard right away if your children don't spend a lot of time with other adults. whether it's they only know their teacher at school, or they only spend time with their aunt, or they only, whatever the thing is, their what next door neighbor. So they don't really know how to have those conversations. And so I actually have created a resource that is called the Testimony Interview Resource that is available
Oh,
to any of you who want it. So if you go to
okay.
bethmeverden.com/testimony, it's right there. And what you can do is, as a family, you can start interviewing the people in your church to get to know them better. You can do it kind of like a family project. And then you know how to pray for those people. And it helps
Mhm.
your children to have those intentional conversations. And then maybe what will happen is one of your children will have a conversation with somebody and go, wow, I really want to get to know that person more. And it may turn into a discipleship situation, a mentoring situation that you would not have known even existed if you didn't use something like that. So I kept thinking about the Mom Next Door, all these great stories that you put out there. I was like, this is a good way for us to find out more stories of the people that we are worshiping with as a family. So hopefully you can utilize that resource.
Mm. We all have them. We all have a story, and
Mhm.
most of the time, you would never guess where somebody came from.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up, I would love to just find out. I know your website, and I'm going to link
Mhm.
that in the show notes along
Great.
with your social handles. You're on Instagram, Facebook.
Yes, I'm also on, I'm so sorry, Pinterest, and all those will be listed below. I'm not as strong on Pinterest. Definitely, I'm on Instagram more often. I've got some reels up there and putting some more information there. But I do have Facebook going as well. So those are the great places to find me. You can email me. It's just simple. It's just trainingyourchild@gmail.com. If you have any questions or you have any specifics that you really are trying to work on with your kids, I'd love to encourage you and empower you by that as well.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. And as we roll up our sleeves in this task of motherhood, would you just pray for us as we do that today?
Absolutely. God, thank you so much for bringing us here to hear this, to be encouraged. Lord, I pray for each of the mamas who are going to listen to this podcast and each of her relationships with each of her children, that she would know how to disciple them, what it can look like for them to grow up in you and grow in the knowledge and the grace of you, Lord. We love you so much. We trust you with our children. We trust you with all of the relationships in our lives. Please help us honor you in them. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thanks for being here with us today, ladies. You know, you can find me on Instagram as well and on Facebook, the Tending Fields Moms Group. Love to see you there. Bye bye.
Bye.
I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true, whatever is known.